the representatives, and I feel like you look at the Sparked program particularly. The There's something unique, something special, something different about it because I'm not, I've been around in the healthcare space for a while, and many in the chat and here on the stage have been around for a lot longer, and the amount of time, the years that we've spent talking around, we need to have interoperability, and it becomes almost a throwaway term and loses a lot of meaning. But there's something different about Sparked. I feel like the presentations from each of you has filled that out for me a little bit more. And in the context of looking at what's happening in the chat, there's live attendees that are clinicians that are asking questions and sharing and getting involved and participating. But I'd love to hear from each of you because we've only got about 10 minutes in this quick panel wrap-up session, but perhaps from each of you for a couple of minutes on what is different about Sparked and what is that Spark difference, because things have been achieved. I feel like it's okay for us to pat ourselves on the back for a little bit for the moment. I know we're all doers and there's a lot more to be achieved. But given we've got each of you here, because there's probably great lessons for others too and will inspire more to be involved, perhaps if we start back in the order of presenters, Simon, I'd love to hear from you on what is that Sparked difference and what makes this different to other interoperability initiatives?
Thanks, Peter. I think one thing is just how much work has gone into building consensus. And I don't just mean in the sort of way that we go about the process of balloting and agreeing to the standards, but even things that people probably don't appreciate, which is that we've got all the states and territories as founding members of this program, in addition to the Commonwealth government, with all the different healthcare providers that are involved in this program, et cetera, et cetera. So we do actually have national consensus when it comes to the involvement of governments in a program like this. That should not be underestimated how powerful that is. And I know we've got some of the state and territory partners coming up to sort of talk a little bit about their own experience of Sparked in a little while. But I do want to thank all the states because, there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Everybody's got a huge agenda, a huge program, and huge implementations. But to be really focused on the future and making sure that as we build out the future, we're considering the way that we move data around the system, that's a really big different thing to the traditional way that we think about how do we go about interoperating within a system that we might operate in. The second thing I think is having clinicians and technologists together in the room with consumers actually really working through that consensus process. It was a very powerful panel at the Digital Health Festival in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago with some clinicians and consumers on the stage talking about that process of gaining consensus. And that it's not just about agreeing on everything, actually the hard part of disagreeing with each other, but listening to each other's views and coming to the middle ground and being prepared to have your view challenged and having your view changed. I think that's also been different in Sparked. So they're probably the two things for me that stand out, and I think one of the two reasons why we've been so successful.
Yeah, they're great points, and gradually as we get through the panel, people like Brett, who'll speak last, will have less and less things. We'll have to think of new creative things to mention. But Peter, what about you? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and look, I won't do the me too from what Simon said, but the areas I'd say that are also different is timing. All the planets are aligning for actually whether the technology is ready for it, whether there's a societal drive and acceptance and consumer demand for this. Clinicians are engaged and actively wanting to get more information about their patients. That is, I've never seen the planets align like this to enable us to deliver truly connected care across the country. And I think that's one additional thing I'd emphasise. The second, I think, is we have a whole investment in all the national infrastructure, whether that's through the development of standards and the work for funding for Sparked, modernisation of My Health Record, Health Connect Australia, and a variety of other things that are happening. That's also coming together at the same time. A lot of the states and territories through their acute hospital systems are investing massively in bringing in digital systems. And I think those things are also quite different. And the third is the National Healthcare Interoperability Plan. And Simon touched on it earlier in his talk. I promise I won't go through it in detail, but what I would say is there's 44 actions in there for governments and others to do. A lot of that work is very unexciting. And I, of course, would be remiss if I didn't say standards are sexy. So there you go, Kate. I've got there now. But what I would say is a lot of that work around the How do we ensure that healthcare identifiers are just universal and used everywhere, every time? How do we ensure the legislation is harmonised? Those type of things are all an interoperability plan. We don't talk about them at Spark because we don't need to, but they do underpin all the work that's being done. So there's another couple of different things of why it's different this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on the we're taking advantage of those planets aligning, as you say, but a lot of work needs to happen in order for it to eventuate. So, David, I'd love to hear any reflections from your side as well.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I think one of the great differences or the great assets of the Sparked approach is the power of partnership. We've got the four formal Spark partners around the table: the department, the agency, CSIRO, and HR7 Australia. But there's also an enormous number of founding members of the Sparked program who are also partners in it. And what Sparked has done extremely well is take the time and make the investment in establishing relationships that make all of this work. That feeds into my second point, and that is about critical mass. What we have in the Sparked program, I mean, if you just go back to some of those statistics that Simon was talking about at the start, the amount of input into the Sparked program is phenomenal. Around standards tables, you normally get a much smaller set of people. But because, for example, there's so many more clinicians involved in this one, it is absolutely impossible to ignore the fact that what we're on about here is trying to make health better. We're not just trying to create technical standards. It's also impossible to ignore that the clinicians have to address some technical things. So simply that critical mass really, really enriches the debate and keeps us focused. And it was terrific to have Brett closing out the presentations, because that's exactly what I mean. This is all about what Brett was talking about, not the kind of arcane stuff under the bonnet that I spend a lot of time talking about.
Well, look, it all ties in, doesn't it? And but that's such a great point that and I certainly get the vibe, even looking at through the comments and questions that people are putting through in attending some of the Sparked sessions. There's everything is on the table, and whilst we may not get to every question live in this session here, generally at a Sparked event, every question will get answered. And if we don't have the answer, then let's work out who will. So there's a lot of people are putting that hard work into transparency there. Brett, I'd love to hear from you. Any other final thoughts and reflections?
Yeah, it's hard not to go over the old ground, but I think I would like to reinforce that Spark does what every proper co-design process should do, which is to create the enabling environment for all of the diverse inputs to come together, to have an open, frank, and appropriately contested space to come to the consensus that leads to the outcomes that we're all seeking. And that doesn't happen accidentally. That happens by deliberate thinking about what creates a welcoming environment, what creates the energy in the room, what makes people feel enabled to speak their mind, and what makes them feel valued in providing their inputs into the conversation. That's a kind of behind the scenes design process, but that's, I think, a huge part of the success of Sparked, that the creation of the community has been done very mindfully, and that the outcomes that arise from it kind of happen organically because that hard work behind the scenes has been done so very well.
Yeah, 100%. And look, that sentiment's definitely coming through in the chat from attendees live as well. We can see, some of those OG regulars and whatnot have definitely resonating with that as well. And Michael's also shared, it's really an opportunity for others. It's not too late to get involved, and it's always, something there for everyone. And this is the right community to do it. So it's been great in this session to really focus on, those key partners for Sparked and where those priorities are, what we've achieved and where to. We'll be be moving on in session 2 to really look at what the jurisdictions are doing. But in order for us to do that, I'll have to say goodbye to our partners here. But thank you so much for your perspectives today.